the fairness of God to receive the glory. Why? Because, first of all, he created us. When God created man, he had a specific purpose and plan for man. That of fellowship with God. And unfortunately, that fellowship with God evidently didn't last very long. We're not really told how long Adam and Eve enjoyed this wonderful garden in which God placed them, called the Garden of Eden. All we know that sometime after they were placed there, with the one prohibition, not to eat of the fruit of the tree which was in the middle of the garden, only one prohibition, and yet typical of humanity, they broke the one law. Interesting, came into the world only one law: don't eat of the fruit of that tree. Why is it that sin is so attractive? Why is it that we seem to be drawn to sin? Why did God make the fruit of that tree attractive? Because God wanted meaningful love, a meaningful, loving relationship with man. And for love to be meaningful, there has to be the choice. You have to have the choice. I can choose to love God and obey God and fellowship with God, or I can choose to live for my own pleasure, to ignore God and to not fellowship with him. The fact that I make a choice makes it meaningful. You see, if I were just forced to serve and worship God, then how could it be meaningful? Everybody would say, well, you know, big deal. You can't do anything else. You know, you're forced to do that. And so choice is a necessary thing in order that the relationship be meaningful. There were times when I was here at the office and I would be working late. I would call Kay and I would say, getting ready to come home, do you need anything from the store? And she would often say, well, honey, you can't believe the day I've had today. Telephone calls all day long, and I just haven't had a chance to fix dinner and all. Why don't we just go out to eat? And I will say, okay. Where do you want to go? And she'll say, well, why don't you choose? And I'll say, well, okay, let's go to Mimi's. Oh, I don't think I want to go to Mimi's tonight. Well, how about no, I want something a little better than Coco's. Well, how about Newport Rib? Oh, that's great. They've got a great salad there, you know. Good. So we go to Newport Rib. And so a few nights later, I call again and say, I'm getting ready to come home. Anything you need? Oh, honey, it's been one of those days again. And let's just go out. Okay, where do you want to go? Well, I just saw a interesting restaurant, sweetheart, and I'd like to try it. She said, oh, no. You had your choice the other night. It's my choice tonight. Now, I haven't got that figured out yet. And I suppose it's just as well I haven't. But choice is necessary in order to have a meaningful relationship. And thus, God, wanting a meaningful relationship with you, has given you the capacity of choice. But for choice to truly be meaningful, the alternative must be attractive. For instance, if that tree in the middle of the Garden of Eden had rotten smelling fruit that would gag you, and if you would get near the tree, you would just be throwing up, just gagging, because it just smells so bad. And the fruit looked sort of fuzzy and all, and you just wouldn't go near it. And so God would look down and see you there in the garden and say, oh, look at that sweet child of mine. They're staying away from that tree. They're not even going close. Oh, how wonderful. They truly love me and are obedient to me. But in reality, it wouldn't really be much of a choice, because the alternative wasn't really attractive at all. But the fact that the fruit of the tree was pleasant to look at, Satan is suggesting it's very delicious to eat, and it will make me wise like God. It made the choice a very meaningful choice, because the alternative seemed to be so desirable and so beautiful. Sin is attractive. Sin is desirable to my flesh. And for me to remain obedient to God, in spite of the fact that the world and the flesh seem to be so attractive, it makes my relationship with God that much more meaningful, that I choose to be obedient. I choose to live in fellowship with God. I choose to walk with God. If I needed a new desk in my office at home, and so as I go outside, my son is there, and I say, son, I'm going down to get a desk, and I'll need you to help me take it upstairs when I get home. So stay here at the house so that you'll be available to help me take the desk upstairs when I return. And then if I would take my son into the backyard and take a big chain and chain him to the eucalyptus tree, and then go down and get the desk, and when I come home, I go back and unchain him, and I say, I have a marvelous son. He's so obedient. He stayed in the backyard the whole while I was gone, didn't leave. I'm proud of my son. My neighbor would say, you should have heard what he was calling you while you were gone, and how he tried to free himself from those chains. But if, on the other hand, I say, son, I'm going to get a desk. I need you to be here when I get home. Don't leave the yard, but wait for me to get back. And as I am leaving, my neighbor is out watering his lawn, and I say to him, you know, would you keep your eye on my son? I ask him to stay in the yard, and I'm just curious, what does he do when Dad's not around? And so I go get the desk, and as I come home, I stop by the neighbor, and I say, well, how did it go? He said, oh, Mr. Smith. And I leave my son totally free. No chains, nothing. He's just free. And the neighbor says, Mr. Smith, you've got a fine son. Wonderful son. He stayed there in the yard the whole while you were gone. Now that little kid up the street, Jimmy, he came over and he said, come